Welcome to the MYM Insider Monthly Top 10. We're counting down the top 10 training moments from MYM founder, author, and CEO, Rich Harshaw. Now, here is your host, Stu Gray.
Hello, listeners. Stu Gray on the MYM Insider Monthly Top 10, where we count down the top 10 moments from all the various training calls, from strategic marketing to tactical marketing to the Innovation Hour and more. This month, Rich hunts down and corners the truth in a TMAC review and shares a story about making connections, real, lasting connections. On the strategic marketing call, he shows insiders how to get something for nothing new. He also takes his own advice about sending prospects something too big to be ignored. Let's go. Our first clip comes from the Innovation Hour. To help insiders innovate, Rich has created a host of innovation formulas like Pulaski No Punt and Speedy Gonzalez. There are over a dozen innovation starters in all, and Rich is always adding new ones. But on this call, Rich focuses on creativity itself. How can we be more creative? How can we think creatively? In his own words, Rich gets a little weird here, but he's in good company, including Napoleon Hill and Alexander Graham Bell. Let's listen, big guy.
Number 10.
I'm going to get a little bit weird on you, and if you can tolerate a certain amount of weirdness, then maybe you'll find some principles in here that might help you out. And what I want to do is create a framework for this discussion of inspiration on purpose by turning to the pages of The Law of Success by Napoleon Hill. You've heard me say that Napoleon was part weird, and some of his ideas and thoughts you have to sort of take with a grain of salt, and you have to look at them and put them into your own mental hopper and think about them and see if you agree with them. But let's give an open mind to some ideas that he has on this topic of inspiration. And he has drawn heavily in his ideas on inspiration from the works of Alexander Graham Bell and Thomas Paine, two important figures from history. And I want to get into what he talks about is the theory of vibration. I've already pre-warned you, I'm getting a little bit into the weird, but again, stick with me, and as I go through this, at the end of this description, and end of this sort of introduction to this theory, we're going to talk about, well, okay, what does that mean and what can you do with it? So that being said, let me just read to you a little bit from The Law of Success. It's a book written in about roughly, I believe, 1920 or thereabouts by Napoleon Hill. It was sort of his life work summarized into 16 lessons on things like imagination, enthusiasm, initiative and leadership, the habit of saving, self-confidence, definite chief aim, mastermind, and so forth. And I'm going to be reading from the chapter called Mastermind. And this is what he wrote that came from the late Dr. Alexander Graham Bell, the inventor of the long-distance telephone and one of the accepted authorities on the subject of vibration. Again, knowing that this is a little bit strange and a little bit weird and potentially very unfamiliar, I want you to just kind of sit back, listen, and see what you can absorb here. He says, suppose that you have the power to make an iron rod vibrate with any desired frequency in a dark room. At first, when vibrating slowly, its movement will be indicated by only one sense, that of touch. As soon as the vibrations increase, a low sound will emanate from it and it will appeal to two senses. At about 32,000 vibrations to the second, the sound will be loud and shrill, but at 40,000 vibrations, it will be silent, and the movements of the rod will not be perceived by touch. Its movements will be perceived by no ordinary human sense. So, by way of just brief commentary, we've got this bar of iron, it's vibrating, and at certain frequencies, it makes sound, and you can also feel the vibrations, but when it gets to 40,000 vibrations per second, the sound frequency is so high that you can't hear it with your ear, and the movement is so rapid that you can't even perceive or feel that it's moving. Now, this is a darkened room, so you're not looking at it, you can't see it, so you'd be feeling it. You couldn't feel it. It would be going so fast. From this point up to about 1.5 million vibrations per second, we have no sense that can appreciate any effect of the intervening vibrations. After that stage is reached, movement is indicated first by the sense of temperature, and then, when the rod becomes red hot, by the sense of sight. At 3 million vibrations per second, it sheds violet light. Above that, it sheds ultraviolet rays and other invisible radiation, some of which can be perceived by instruments and are employed by us. So here's what he's saying. As you get into these super high frequencies, 1 million vibrations per second, up to 3 million, that different kinds of light will come from the vibrations that are coming from this bar, okay? So down at low vibrations, you can feel it. You can hear it. As it gets higher, you can't hear it anymore, but then you can start to see it based on the waves that are coming off of it, okay? Here's what he says. This is still Alexander Graham Bell talking, being quoted by Napoleon Hill. Now, it has occurred to me that there must be a great deal to be learned about the effect of those vibrations in that great gap where the ordinary human senses are unable to hear, see, or feel the movement. The power to send wireless messages by ether vibrations lies in that gap, but the gap is so great that it seems there must be much more. You must make machines practically to supply new senses as the wireless instruments can do. Now, think about this. In his day, in 1920, the technology of sending radio waves was brand new. And this is one of those things that we don't pay much attention to because we've got wireless internet now, and we've got smartphones and iPhones and PDAs that allow us to have an unbelievable amount of data sent to us through the sky, as it were. But here's what you need to understand. All of that data is coming on vibrations, literally on waves. If you understand anything about radio and TV waves that are broadcast, there's a broadcasting tower that sends waves at certain frequencies. That's what 102.9 versus 107.5. Those are different frequencies, and those waves are at different sizes, and depending on the size, you've got a different message that's being delivered. Now, hopefully you can start to kind of see where this is going. We've got different things that can be communicated at different frequencies, okay? You don't have to be an expert on the topic of frequencies and waves to be able to understand this general concept of things can be communicated via these waves. And he's saying that there's light waves that communicate light, we can see. There's sound waves that communicate sound, we can hear. There's also waves in this intervening gap where radio, TV, and in our day, internet, smartphone, cell phone, PDA, these types of waves are bringing information. So here's where he's going with all of this. He's saying if it's possible that a cell tower can transmit a certain vibration, that as long as you've got a device that's tuned in to that frequency, as long as you've got a radio that's tuned into the frequency of that radio station or TV to the TV station, is it possible that thought vibrations can communicate also? And if so, at what frequency?
Okay, mind reading is a little weird, but the brain fires off electrical pulses at a rate of, well, it's a high rate. It's not too crazy to think that a room full of skull-sized electric dynamos might be charging the surrounding airspace and affecting one another. In fact, it's crazier to think they wouldn't.